Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Wan. I'm a performing violinist, and you're listening to the Talking Blues podcast.
Performing violinist. I mean, that's. I'm curious as to why you describe yourself that way.
I can't really do anything else. I play violin in a variety of settings, and the one where most people will see me is on stage with the Montreal Symphony. I've been the concert master for, well, this is my 16th season. And so I guess I could have introduced myself as the concert master of the Montreal Symphony, but I wear a few other hats. I'm in the New Orford String Quartet. I teach violin at McGill. I do some solo, some ad hoc chamber music. Um, yeah, I guess I could have said I'm an aspiring, versatile violinist, but only playing classical music. You hear me play a little bit of tango or jazz, and then you quickly ask me to play classical again.
Oh, I doubt that very much. You started.
Well, I do like dabbling, but there's no improv on my end.
You started really early. In fact, violin is your second instrument, if I'm not mistaken.
That's yeah. Uh, I rarely talk about this, but I think the first lessons I had was on piano, and it didn't last very long. My older siblings played piano, and for whatever reason, my parents moved me to violin. I think my father always wanted to be a violinist and or loved the violin. And so after two kids who were quite involved in piano, and I probably didn't have that much natural talent with piano, I started taking lessons at the age of four on violin. And I had the same violin teacher in Edmonton for 12 years. She was the first woman to bring the Suzuki method to North America
Wow.
through Banff. Her name is Yoko Oiki Wong. And the Banff Center brought her in, and she brought this method over. She worked directly with Mr. Suzuki, and she established herself in Edmonton. So I took lessons with her for 12 years, and I'm still very close with her.
Okay, for those of us who are very ignorant, because I've heard the Suzuki method being mentioned many times, but I couldn't tell you what it is. Is it something you can easily describe to me what the Suzuki method is?
You know, there is like a huge industry and culture around it. There are books that you can buy, there are classes that you can take, group classes, and there is like a codified system. Um, but I think the spirit of it is that it's quite well regimented and that you really have to help the student develop hearing and listening in the beginning. And even before reading music, just like there's a lot of playback. And I think that's kind of the fundamental aspect to it. And you should probably ask a certified Suzuki teacher if they would describe it this way, but I've always kind of regarded it as such. Um, there was a lot of imitation growing up, watching her play and then just trying to mimic her. And my sense of pitch, which I thought for a long time was perfect pitch, meaning I could, call out any tone and be able to name it. I thought I had that, but it turns out I just have very, very good relative pitch. I can hear all the pitches on the violin or piano or most orchestra instruments. But if a truck passes by and somebody asks me, "Oh, what's that note?" I really have to think about it. So I guess it's not perfect. But I really do owe my ability to kind of identify pitches and my sense of intonation probably to the Suzuki method, and that's mostly due to the fact that there's a lot of listening involved.
Okay, so when you start at the age of four, and this is your dad saying you should play the violin, but at what point do you totally connect with the violin? Like, how? At what point do you think, I love this?
I probably went through moments where I really enjoyed playing the violin, uh, but by and large, it was probably a struggle for my parents to get me to practice. Because it was less interesting for someone with such a short attention span to sit there and for the amount of work that's required to actually feel comfortable on the instrument. It takes a lot of mindful logical practice, and there's no getting around it. All of the best violinists go through long extended periods of, you could probably call it mundane work, where you're just drilling something, or, coming up with solutions. And that was very hard for me as a rambunctious kid. I'd much rather watch TV or go play outside. But then, every year there was something called, the Kiwanis Festival, where like every, aspiring violinist, puts himself or herself in a position to compare themselves to others. And yeah, it's competitive environments. And it wasn't that like I felt like I had to win, because I certainly didn't all the time. And those were difficult moments, but very important growing up. It was more that I just didn't want to embarrass myself, and I just wanted to sound good. I didn't want to embarrass my mom and dad. I didn't want to embarrass my teacher, who was, cared for her very much. And I think it was youth orchestra, Edmonton Youth Orchestra, going every Saturday, and then just finding peers that were like me, that were further along that path, who loved it more than I did and taught me things, and, asked me if I had heard certain recordings, and being introduced to the orchestral repertoire. It was 12th grade where I realized, I was in high school, and we had to talk about what we were going to do next. And the University of Alberta did like a symposium, early registration for my high school. And I didn't know what I was going to choose. And then I thought about it. I thought about it, and I realized, well, all my really close friends that I kind of see eye to eye with outside of school are in youth orchestra. Now looking back, I realized it was that kind of ensemble playing and feeling like I was around like-minded people every Saturday, that drove me into music. So that's kind of late. A lot of people who call music their career, they had a connection earlier. Mine came later, and my serious dedication, devotion to the craft of playing the violin came in my university years, where I really felt like I had to play catch up.
I mean, I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true, that you weren't really sure that you wanted to be a full time musician until you got into Juilliard. Is that true?
Yeah, it was probably around that time. I probably didn't think I could do it. I think the more I got interested in it, and, started becoming more critical, the kind of blind confidence that you might have when you're younger, when things are going your way, starts to dissipate when you're actually really listening to what you're doing, and then starting to compare yourself to other people who have just gotten there sooner and put in their, whatever, 10,000 hours of real serious work. And but when I started to see results, and that was directly correlated to the time that I spent, woodshedding, just practicing as much as I could, and putting myself out there, then I realized, okay, maybe there is a path forward. Maybe I do see myself in this world, other than being able to play the instrument. You want to see if you can exist in this type of social setting. Musicians, as you know, are like, it is a job, very much a job for me. But at the same time, it's also like a social thing, where you have to go around and play with different people all the time. Sometimes the very first time I meet somebody, we do exchange pleasantries, and then we have to work together within minutes and play something that we might feel like we both have a deep connection to, and then coming to a compromise, or having a dialogue where you might be at odds, but then you feel like, well, we have to present some kind of cohesive interpretation together. I think that's essential in our business, to be able to make music and, have a rapport and a dynamic with just about anybody. And that took developing, because, boys, boys are kind of stubborn, and, especially kind of cocky boys who don't really know what they don't know. I had to learn to be flexible and malleable. Um, yeah, and it's humbling to be surrounded by just great artists, and realize what you don't know.
When you decided to be a musician, And I guess you never know what that means. But when you applied for Juilliard and you did get in, at that point, I presume you thought my career path is as a musician.
For sure. Yeah, I was doing everything I could at that point to try to make it work. I wasn't sure where it would lead me. Everyone has aspirations. I would say everyone has aspirations when they get to Juilliard to just play as really as well as you can, and it is by nature just like a very competitive place. The stories that you hear about people putting razor blades in between keys at the piano. I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's like from a different era, but there is this old joke that they say um, at most music schools, if someone's missing from class and you see them on Monday, you'll say, "Oh, where were you?" And they'll say, "Oh, I had this gig playing, I don't know, with the let's say Baltimore Symphony or something like that." And then in other schools, they'll say, "Oh, how did it go?" But then the joke is at Juilliard, you'll say, "Oh, you played with the Baltimore Symphony? How did you get that gig?" So it has this reputation of being this way. But in fact, I found it quite comfortable because I was there for so many years. I had a peer group and I really hit it off with my teachers. My private instructors were mentors, but also became friends of mine. And they helped shield me from making too many mistakes. Yeah, I felt like I had the room to grow and to experiment and to fail while knowing that I had a safety net. It wasn't like I only had 2 years there. I had 3 degrees there, so it felt like coming back in September for the next degree. Just the next logical step, which is good and bad thing. I probably could have expanded my horizons and tried out a different school or a different city, but on the plus side, I felt more and more comfortable. And, you know, I think as with anything, there's the task that you have to do, and, you have to do all the steps to make sure you can complete that task. But then there's also confidence. Like if you don't have confidence, then push comes to shove, that thing might not happen when you have to deliver. And I think having people that were there and patient with me and that were just able to show me the way without making me feel like I was making a huge misstep. That helped me gain confidence, and that actually is very similar to my path in the Montreal Symphony when I first got my job right out of school, or I was actually still in school for the last 2 years, and then I started the job. Um, I didn't realize what I didn't know, and I think people were just happy to see that I was willing to grow into the role. I think it would be uh, a big mistake to go into this role thinking, "Oh, I know everything, and everyone should listen to me," which is kind of the way the job sometimes can be. But the way it worked out for me when I first joined the orchestra, looking back, I realized the conductor who hired me, Kent Nagano, and then my section gave me a lot of room. No one was jumping at me if I made mistakes. And like if I was making mistakes, I would slowly realize them over time. It took me some time, but I'm still realizing them.
I wonder if you said you came to your decision to become a musician came later in life. What else would you have done if you didn't pursue music? Was there any other alternative?
There was a time where I really enjoyed drawing. For a while, I was telling everybody that I liked architecture. I did a school project where I interviewed a family friend, and I got really interested in what he was doing. He was in commercial and residential architecture, and I thought that was just a beautiful craft. Um, what else? I mean, now I really enjoy teaching. So I can imagine if my life wasn't centered around playing all the time, that I would continue to teach, but more full time. There was a time when I was at Juilliard where I was teaching as an assistant to the full faculty member ear training. just like solfege. And I really liked getting up there and, holding court, talking, making jokes. So I really do enjoy teaching. And I would say now probably I've lost that interest in architecture, even though I do love beautiful buildings.
Okay, so you go to Juilliard. I'm curious as to what you hope to be when you got out of Juilliard. Is it? I get the impression that you were pursuing a career of a soloist. Is that correct?
I didn't know what was possible. Of course, like I did competitions where I put myself out there for solo, and sometimes it went very well, sometimes it didn't. I had a very serious piano trio with a pianist who's quite well known now. His name is Julio Elizalde. He's from the Bay Area, and he runs a festival on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, teaches at San Francisco Conservatory, and he works with Ray Chen, very famous violinist, and Sarah Chang a lot. And he was much more developed when it came to chamber music than I did, but we hit it off at a summer music festival, and then he came to Juilliard, and we found is this Israeli cellist. His name is Gal Niska, who's now in the Israel Philharmonic. And we were best friends and did everything together. And Julio always had this idea that if we wanted to make it work, we had to work as hard as string quartets. The string quartet repertoire, so much larger, so in a way much more glorious, and it just much more intricate, and you don't have the piano to fall back on or hide. And just by dint of this, when we entered competitions, I think most piano trios, depend on, flashiness and soloistic tendencies, and it can really work. And you can't do that in string quartet. But he said, if we really wanted to compare ourselves to a string quartet, we ought to put in the kind of effort and thoughtfulness that it would take to have a successful string quartet. And we did approach our piano trio like this. So we worked for a few years like this, and with great success. We did a few competitions, and were, we were recognized almost every single time. And we were starting to make a career out of it, and starting to make respectable seasons where we were asked to. Uh, we were re-engaged to go back on serious series, and I thought, okay, this is like a viable path for me. It's not glamorous in any way. Sometimes you might have to travel to a town that you might not want to go to, and then stay in a hotel that's not so fancy. But at least I'm with my buddies, and I did a little bit of the solo thing at the same time, and I found that incredibly tiring and nerve-wracking. You didn't have the camaraderie with anybody because you go somewhere and then you have to prove yourself by yourself. And I found that quite, I think those who choose that as a path, first of all, like the level of playing and just the amount of notes that they have in their head and in their fingers, I just find that outstanding. Um, I didn't ever think that was going to be my path. I thought I was going to be a,
But you were doing it.
I was doing it somewhat. I thought my career was going to be chamber musician and, being asked to play freelance with people that I respect, and then occasionally play solos. But I can't imagine playing 20, 30 concertos a year, or yeah, it just, I think the most I ever did in one season was six different concertos, lined up with all my other stuff, and that was exhausting because I'm not doing six different concertos, let alone 15 different concertos every year. And it's just to bring each one to a level where you feel really comfortable, and you might only play it once in the season where you're not playing it over and over. I just thought that's a really grinding and difficult life. With the piano trio, I felt like, wow, this is just, I'm getting to touch some of the greatest music ever written. Schubert piano trios, Beethoven Archduke trio, Ravel piano trio. And there was something about this repertoire for the audience member. If it was played right with the right piano in the right space, and if things went well, I think it can be a really overwhelming and intimate personal experience. And I really loved that. I really love that. And that's why chamber music plays a big role in my life. I think I would be devastated if I was only doing just orchestra, or I'd be pretty devastated if I was doing just chamber music too, personally, because it goes the other way too, because I'm able to bring my experiences from playing in a huge symphonic ensemble to different experiences too. So I think that versatility is ultimately what I was aiming for near the end, before I got the job.
But when you got the job at the Montreal Symphony, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't like you was seeking that job. It kind of came to you because of your work with your solo work. Was it not?
Yeah. So it's actually, it was quite fortuitous. There's a Montreal Symphony competition. I think it's every 3 years. It's like a national competition. And there's also an international competition, which has, huge prizes. And they always end up choosing fantastic soloists. But something about this national competition, they really support their winners. And basically, anybody who has a notable career in Canada and is Canadian has touched this competition. And even if they hadn't won, they had, done really well in the competition and were seen. And so this competition has launched the careers of many people, including myself. And when I was doing this competition, just a few weeks prior to the first round, I was talking to my pianist Julio, and he had said, What are you going to play?" And I told him each round what I was going to play, and the final round was I had planned to play the Sibelius Concerto, which I'd done a few times with orchestra. I'd, been learning over the years, and it's a very standard competition work. And he said, I just feel like that will be fine, but you may not stand out. Probably not going to stand out. And you should play the piece that you played with the Juilliard Orchestra last year. There was a competition where at Juilliard they have one or two violin competitions a year where they choose the piece and everyone is playing that piece. Everyone who enters that competition. And the year prior to that, I played the Elgar Violin Concerto, which is a very unusual work, super long, very gnarly. It's a gargantuan work, and I dove right into that. I just immediately connected with that piece, and it just went really well when I played it with the Juilliard Orchestra. And he said, how much effort would it take to bring it back and play that piece? Because if you happen to make it to the finals, and if you happen to win, to get to play this with the orchestra, it'd be amazing. Because how many times do they play Sibelius? Probably once every 15 months. And when I won the competition, and then as part of the prize, I got to play the Elgar Concerto, uh, members of the orchestra said, I've never played this piece before. I heard recordings of Menuhin or Nigel Kennedy playing this, but it's fun that I got to play it. And I think the level of attention from the musicians, just because of the fact that this was a piece that they had to practice, they couldn't just like show up and, play the piece that they had just played last year. There was just like a little bit more heightened awareness of what was happening. And yeah, I wouldn't say I'm the best violinist who's ever won this competition. I just think Julio was right. This is a piece that made me stand out. And a few months after my concerts with them, I received a call from the symphony, and I guess the competition organizer, her name was Marianne Perron. She's now head of artistic operations at the orchestra. And the conductor who conducted that concert, Jean-Francois Rivet, and then a few musicians suggested to Nagano, Ken Nagano, the music director at the time, that they give me a shot. And I was over the moon. I had done a little bit of guesting as a guest concert, like invited guest concertmaster for another orchestra, and it was way less comfortable than going to Montreal, where I didn't know any more, but I knew more people, and they knew that I had played that Elgar. So they were extremely welcoming, and it was an immediate fit. Just felt really great. And Nagano asked me to come back, finish the season, do a recording with them, play an audition, and within a few months, like I was starting my trial period as one of the concertmasters. At that time, there was going to be two concertmasters, and that was the case until last year. And Richard Roberts, my partner, the other concertmaster who I rotated with, he retired last year. So that was another reason why it felt really comfortable. It wasn't a full time job right away. I had time to learn the music. I had opportunities on the rare occasion where we would play together where I could watch him lead. I could see how he handled things and then fit my personality into, some techniques and strategies he used. Yeah, so it was due to the solo work at first, but then I don't think anyone remembers that concert anymore except for me. I think everyone's just like, okay, it's just old hat. Andrew's here now, and he's here to stay for foreseeable future.
Tell me what I asked Jonathan this when I interviewed him, but tell me what is the role of the concertmaster? Describe to me how you see that role to be.
Um, well, Jonathan and I are both like huge hockey fans, so I think the best analogy that I've used is like if you think of orchestra as like the team, and the coach is the conductor. He's the one who's deciding the direction of the orchestra or the team. I would say the role of concertmaster is the captain. So you might take the ceremonial puck drop. So I tune the orchestra. So everyone sees Jonathan and I and other concertmasters do this. It's just like an old European tradition. And we get called upon to, be the face of the orchestra most of the time. I mean, others are doing it a lot as well. We're there representing the orchestra in a civic manner. Sometimes you serve as a liaison to the conductors. So if there's a guest conductor, if he or she has certain wishes, and sometimes it's quicker for me to serve as a conduit, or the administration. They obviously have a musicians committee and an artistic committee, but then sometimes they have to go through me for some artistic matters, and sometimes some personnel matters. I'm also the leader of the first violin sections, and a lot of the decisions that are taken by the person who sits in my chair flow down into the other sections. So if I decide, okay, this pivotal moment, we're going to do this bow direction, like it or not, everyone basically has to do it. And there are exceptions where, it's a very hierarchical system, and it's mostly due to the fact that there's just so little time to do anything. And so this person is designated to make that decision, and people just have to hope that my mind is in the right place or I'm doing it for the right reasons. And I hope that it is. I also sometimes serve as like a focal point, and it's not always me. There are other people that are tasked with this, but sometimes if there's a moment of, oh, where are we going to play this next moment, and the conductor is busy with taking care of the flow of a phrase or a balance thing in concert, I think I can feel like the heat uh, directed towards me. It's like, oh, where is he going to decide to interpret where that conductor wants this next moment to occur? And sometimes I have to just, even though I'm not a huge person, make sure I'm a bigger person and make sure I'm demonstrative and show where that happens. And there have been times where I realized, whoa, I not only did I do that wrong, or interpret it the wrong way, me being too demonstrative here made it worse, because the focal point shouldn't have been me. So just being able to decide how big I'm going to be in that chair comes with experience. It's not always me all the time. Um, it's, being able to judge how important my role is. But there is a default where eyes turn towards the concertmaster And for that matter, other section leaders as well. It just happens to be this is the way it's set up.
Can you talk about the bowing, like the importance of the bow? And you said you dictate, or you kind of dictate how the bowing is done in your section. Tell me about the importance of bow for people who have no idea what that really means.
Yeah. Well, if if you want to sing something, you can sing it in a variety of ways. But if you want to sing it in character, you might use uh, different consonants or vowels to enunciate the start of a note. And you might even put an M at the end of a note, like if you want to go yadaram or ta or pa or that sort of thing. And where you are in the bow, so lower in the bow or at the tip, uh, you can get a lot of cohesion from a lot of people very quickly if people can see where I'm doing it. Or even there are things that are just understood. There's a symbol for what's called a down bow, and where I start from the lower part of the bow and then go to the upper part of the bow. That's the very basic tenet of that. And then the up bow, it looks like a V, and that's where I go from the tip to the frog or any length bow, but that's the direction. And there's this natural kind of, if you're not counterbalancing this with other techniques, the down bow usually has an exhalation feeling that goes yeah down, and then the up bow goes, and of course not everything that goes yeah. That's just bad technique, but I mean that's kind of the natural feeling of it. So you want to make sure that the phrase, if it's like a longer phrase, you want to make sure the bowing fits what you think the music is going to want to be. And there have been times where I'll decide like a whole slew of bowings, and then there's quite a bit of changes that occur in rehearsals where I realize, oh, the conductor wants this articulation. He wants, instead of a very pointed attack, he wants something that's a little bit more matted or felty. So then I decide, okay, the bow direction might be correct. Like we might be starting on an up bow, but where I am going to be in the bow, then we decide, okay, here we're going to play it 3/4 of the way up, or right at the tip, or right in the middle, or that sort of thing. That sort of thing. The greatest orchestras have a lot of unanimity, and there's a clarity about, okay, at the very least, we're all going to do it the same way. We're going to do it the same way, and if it's going to be a success, we're going to do it together, and if it's going to be a failure, at least we're going to do it together, because it's there's nothing. Um, there's nothing more disappointing when the music is about it, when it's supposed to be about cohesion and togetherness, when it's like a little bit random. There are moments where there should be like soloistic uh, personalities that come out, but usually the first violin section needs to play together as a unit. The second violins have to play together as a unit, and each section sometimes we have to play together with other teams, um, and sometimes there's a battle on stage. There's like a musical battle where things have to pop out of the texture, and then making sure it's well calibrated. And it all has to do with it starts from the bow, and then of course you get into other nuances like vibrato and the type of color that you might want to use, and it just goes on and on. And I feel like the greatest orchestras are able to pick up on these decisions very quickly in the process so that you can get to other things.
Is it easy for you to determine what the bowing should be when you look at a piece that you've never played before?
I would I'm I wouldn't say it's easy. I would say that everyone has their own process. I talk to other concert masters, and by and large, we all kind of do it the same way. Jonathan said to me, he's like, he realized that he's much more efficient when he has his violin in front of him, and then he tries something, because sometimes things in theory don't work so well in the wild. I have done bowings on plane rides or sometimes without my instrument, but he's right. It does work better when you are in front of your instrument. Listening to recordings helps. On some occasions, you watch videos and see how the other orchestras interpret the music. Um, it's also important, I realized, to be not dogmatic. You have, go-to techniques and maneuvers that are going to work. But then if a conductor wants something that I didn't envision, I have to be able to pivot quickly, even if I disagree, my job isn't there to be at odds with anybody. It's there to facilitate, cohesion and teamwork. So having the humility to just accept that the decision that I made, you know, let's say 3 months ago, bowing the symphony, it's not working. I think that's important, and not to get stuck into a groove, and just being open to new ideas. And I feel like I'm pretty good at that, at being able to see that the choices I made might not have worked in a certain context.
As a concert master, how involved are you in the planning of the program or the pieces that the orchestra plays? Do you have any say in that, or?
I have probably, well, there are some concert masters out there that do a lot of that and are quite involved and are quite good at it. There are some concert masters that are really good at public speaking and do a lot of that. There are some concert masters that are very good at, other elements of the job, playing solos and that sort of thing. I'm not so involved in the overall programming. Sometimes they come to me about putting together smaller projects, chamber music projects. Sometimes conductorless concerts. Obviously, I have a say in what solos I get to play. Um, every year, by and large, I get to play like a concerto, and they're never going to try to make me play something that I can't play or I don't want to play. So, but I'm quickly running out. I was counting over 15 years. I probably played like 30 concertos, in all types of settings, and that's a lot of different pieces. And I don't think anyone wants me to play stuff that I don't know so well. So it takes careful planning and making sure that I'm ready to play when push comes to shove. But to answer your question, no, that job is the programming director's job in tandem with the music director, as they kind of carve out the identity of the orchestra over a period of time. And there's like a theme each season, and there's like an overarching kind of personality that they want to superimpose on the orchestra, and that's fun to be part of some kind of trajectory.
So tell me, see, you're in a string quartet. You play chamber music with other people. You're a concertmaster for a major symphony, and you probably still do some solo work or guest soloist for other orchestras. Does your approach to those different roles on the violin differ greatly from being a string quartet member to a soloist to being a concertmaster?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the sound has to change. I'm playing in when I'm playing chamber music. I rarely play in a hall that's as large as the Montreal Symphony Hall, and something about standing up and playing a solo is different than playing a solo when I'm sitting in my chair and then randomly have to play like a 20-second solo 20 minutes into a large work. So the playing itself is different, but also, you know, uh, the onus is different. We're always a little bit beholden when I'm playing in my section to what the conductor wants. And usually he or she will, communicate their vision, and I always feel like our job is to make that thing work. And of course, it's not always going to be a marriage of like minds. It's going to be how are we going to function? And if I view being a soloist, like the amount of time it takes to prepare a solo work, by and large, most conductors allow the soloist to kind of dictate the flow of the piece and the style and the kind of the atmosphere of the work. So there's much more pressure on the soloist to impose the personality. And when it comes to the string quartet, now that this is pure negotiation, we're all equals. And it's funny, my quartet started off as for principal chair symphonic musicians, from different orchestras, and we're all used to getting our own way. And this has been like a great exercise in humility and acceptance, because, of course, all those other guys, and now Sharon has joined our quartet, and she she's a real great malleable peacemaker, and but we everyone has great ideas, and I have the utmost respect for everybody. So it is about compromise, a musical compromise where you accept someone's ideas. It's like a dinner party where someone might have a differing view about what's going on in the world, and but you're not going to get up and leave. Hopefully not. You're going to share your ideas and then meld them together and hopefully reach a place of understanding, or take joy in the fact that there is like this tension, and uh, there's a lot of tension in music, where you build up this kind of dissonance, and then that release can be absolutely exhilarating. And sometimes when the release doesn't happen, you feel like, okay, we'll get it the next time.
The thing that really surprises me about what you do, in all aspects of what you do, I believe, whether you're with the orchestra or with the string quartet, it's not like you have a lot of rehearsal time. And it's not like you're spending months and months rehearsing on any given thing, right? Like you're executing at a very high level with minimal rehearsal. Is that correct to say?
Yeah. And in fact, there's been this phenomenon, like maybe our perception has changed a little, but I don't think it's changed that much. Where I've spoken to many musicians, I'm sure other musicians have mentioned this to you coming out of the pandemic, that there was like this period of inactivity or large gaps between like this a lot of intermittent work. So we had a lot of time to fixate on the next thing, but now it's always the next thing is in a few days, and it's something completely different. And we all said coming out of the pandemic, especially last year, wow, it just feels a little bit more um, chaotic. It just feels like we're running from one thing to the next. Maybe our bodies got used to like this, yeah, it's inertia maybe. There was like this period of stasis. I don't know.
I mean, does it
Yeah, that's
seem
always
more
going.
busier than it was before the pandemic? Or is it just because
I
you're
feel
used to
like
that downtime?
I think there's a little bit of that. I think everyone's getting older too, and then the stuff that we accepted when we were younger, like putting our bodies through, red eye flight, and then go to two rehearsals after a plane ride, but after playing a concert in like a different time zone. That just feels harder. It just feels harder, and just the way this works. It's also exhilarating. Sometimes some of the most exciting performances I've ever been a part of have been both wow, major planning and just beautiful execution because of confidence, and everyone just feels like, okay, this is what we're going to do. From the timing of how everything's going to roll out to what we're saying on stage. There's like we left nothing to chance, and it just worked. And then on the other hand, some of the other really fulfilling experiences I've been a part of were, see what's going to happen. And then we're just, there's a heightened sense of awareness and attention. And then somehow it just worked. And being a part of both of those things can be really satisfying as a musician. So I have to say, I really liked the downtime where, I could really get into certain works during the pandemic. But I think if I had to choose, the lots of stuff all the time is what keeps this fresh and interesting. There might be too much pressure if you only have one concert every 3 months where everything is riding on like this one particular performance. But if you have like a nice balance of lots of stuff to do and enough time to practice and enough time to rest, and you just feel like, yeah, I'm in shape, and I'm just used to performing, and I feel good about performing, and I don't have to wait 2 3 weeks to perform. Yeah, I think that's nice too.
With the Montreal Symphony, I have no idea what kind of schedule you keep. In the next month, how many gigs will you be doing?
Well, we have a summer season, and we worked very hard, and then there was, I don't know, 4 sets of concerts in September, so 2 or 3 shows a week. New program. We just played a concert last night, playing one tomorrow. And my next thing with the orchestra is in 10 days, where I'm playing Beethoven Violin Concerto with our orchestra and the music director, Raphael Payare. I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself because that is like the Mount Olympus of, of violin concertos. So this is my one for the year, and I've played it with other orchestras in different seasons, and I'll be playing it with another orchestra in Topico the week before, and that'll be a great chance to play it again. It does feel like nonstop, and especially because the periods where it's not filled in my calendar with rehearsals where I have to be somewhere with somebody. I'm usually practicing or I'm teaching. I fill in these cracks with my students at McGill, and um, occasionally I'll see people who are outside of my studio. People come in for lessons, and that can quickly fill up my day. And it's very enriching, but extremely exhausting. Yesterday, we had a dress rehearsal finished at 12:30, and then I taught from 1:30 till 5:30, and the concert was at 7:30. And I saw another faculty member who plays flute in my orchestra, piccolo and flute. And we just looked at each other in the bathroom and we just rolled our eyes. What are we doing? We didn't get to go home. Didn't like we and then after seeing him in the bathroom, I went to the food court underneath the hall, the Montreal Symphony, and I saw Brian, the cellist of my quartet, and we were just eating food court food, and we just like we were joking that we were living the life.
Well,
Yeah, so that's a typical day.
but when I saw you in the summer, we had a short chat and we were talking about life balances and how difficult it was. And I think summer's also difficult because I think you do a lot more festivals and stuff. But how do you
That's
find
right.
that? How do you do that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this summer was particularly strenuous and like a lot of traveling and traveling. This is not in my imagination, but it's gotten harder, like with cancellations and, knowing what's possible. Then the next year you'll be like, well, I have been able to do this where I had a concert and then I fly it somewhere overnight and then I'm somewhere else the next day playing something else. I'll just do that again. I've done it before, so it's fine. And so on top of my orchestra work, I counted I had 9 different festivals over the course of 3 months,
Wow.
and each lasting at least a week. So like on the road or working in Montreal the whole summer. And my week off was last week. My summer was filled, and that's been a source of consternation for family time for sure.
Hmm.
But that's not unique. There's a lot of performing musicians that bring their family along, and they're able to have some semblance of normalcy because this is our life. And I will always remember when James Ennis came and soloed with us. For those of you who don't know, he is the preeminent violinist. I wouldn't even say Canadian violinist. He's just one of the world's best violinists, and he just happens to be coming from Brandon, Manitoba. And he solos with all the great orchestras, and he was soloing us with us this one week. And that rehearsal ended at 12:30, and then he had another concert that he was preparing for with some musicians in the orchestra, and we rehearsed with him till, let's say, I don't know, 2:15, 3 o'clock. And then he said to me, "Do you want to just eat something before the concert?" And I said, "Okay." And we sat at this restaurant and had a burger sitting outside, and I was getting nervous for him because his concert was at 7:30 or 8. And by about 4 o'clock, I said, "Well, I'm gonna let you go, man. You got to go rest because I know I would not be doing what you're doing. I would be, pacing around in my room, practicing frantically." And he said, "Andrew, this is my life." And I long ago realized that if I can't have some kind of routine or happiness in feeling relaxed, if I can't enjoy my time eating a burger with a friend or spending some time outside, if I'm just going to go nuts, yeah, it's not the life I want to live. And first of all, he doesn't really need to go nuts. He just like it comes very naturally to him. you know, he's blessed. But that was good for me to remember. There doesn't have to be all strife and all running around. It can be quite joyful, and I've never seen him stressed out. So that's a nice model to live by.
At this stage of your career, do you have goals?
Yeah, I had more, I would say, different, clearer aspirations when I was younger, but they weren't grounded in reality or art making really. It was just like, oh, I want to play this concert or play with these people or whatever. Things that ultimately, it's not unique. Everyone thinks this way. It's always fun to have new experiences and to be recognized. But I would say my my focus is making sure that I'm saying something with my playing all the time. And part of realizing that has been teaching and seeing like my grade students, you know, surpass the next step and just making sure what they're doing is meaningful and they're saying stuff that people want to listen to. And sometimes we can get bogged down in the craft or the minutia and just feel like, oh, I'm just a violinist rather than I'm an art maker. I'm making music for people. I have to be convincing. So not only do I have to focus on the technique and the discipline, but I have to commit to convincing people of whatever musical argument or statement. And, as I get into this next phase of my career, I've always considered myself as the young guy. I'm not the young guy anymore. I'm turning 40 this year. And, you know, I can't believe that I've been in the orchestra for this long. I need to make sure that I stay in shape and I continue growing and I don't get stuck in, in certain ways because things are evolving. The aesthetic has changed. What people wanted to hear before is slowly changing, and I need to make sure I'm with it. I'm developing. That's important, and that's ultimately going to be the most fulfilling thing. And the concerts will come, and I'm lucky to have the concerts that I'm offered all the time. I could some of my most favorite memories musically have been with the Montreal Symphony or with the New Orpheus String Quartet or playing with my pianist Charles Emelet. Just being able to get to the next level. And the thing is, nobody tells you this. You get to the next level, and your next concert doesn't necessarily start at that level. You can't take it for granted. There's no new default. You have to put in the same kind of effort each time, which is fun. I think this wouldn't be fun if it was easy.
Okay, so when you say the next level, to get to that next level, to improve, like when I just turned on the camera, you were already rehearsing. And I presume you rehearse many hours a day. Is that the way to get to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, you have to put in the requisite number of hours. Some people require less hours, but probably those people, other than having physical gifts, are just thoughtful all the time. And sometimes, especially if you're just drilling something over and over again because you're obsessed with not wanting to make a mistake, you can just kind of turn off your brain a little bit and just go through repetitive motions. There have been periods where, I'm a huge, avid Edmonton Oilers fan, and during playoffs, it's really hard not to watch games, but then I have to balance, I got to practice. So, there have been times where, the TV's on or a computer's on and I'm streaming a game. And, I can be forgiven because playoffs last, but, a few weeks or hopefully a few months. The worst that I ever did, I put a mute on my violin because I needed to hear the game and I was playing really softly. So I was just moving my fingers, but you can cut that out. You can cut that out.
Oh, that's the good stuff.
Yeah.
Andrew, thank you so much for doing this. I had a chance to work with you during the pandemic and for the Toronto Summer Music Festival, and I got to edit one of your beautiful pieces that was stunning.
You did such a great job.
Well, thank you.
You did such a wonderful job.
No, it was just such a beautiful piece to edit, and unusual for me to edit a piece that's just solo violin on its own.
Yeah.
But yeah. I've enjoyed watching you play a few times since then at that festival, and thank you so much for doing this. I've always wanted to sit down and talk to you, and I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to listen to it.
You take care.
Take care.